Well, greetings. Welcome to another edition of the Has Been podcast, coming to you on from the Has Been studio, which is my back porch, and we're taped before a live studio audience of one, as our cat sits in the window or the door and watches what I do for the next 20 or 25 minutes. So another edition of the Has Been podcast. Why is it called the Has Been podcast? Because you're looking at a has been. So, where we just opine and talk about things, sports related, mostly related to Purdue and whatever else comes to mind. Speaking of else comes to mind, the Cubs season is about to end tomorrow. We're taping this on Tuesday, so their season will probably come to an end on Wednesday in Wrigley Field, and then I can change out my Cubs flag for the Bears flag, whose season isn't over yet, but probably will be in the next couple months. Anyway, what we'll discuss today is football's game at or against Illinois, and why I I like Barry Odom's message right now, what he's conveying, and then got Big Ten basketball media day coming up Wednesday and Thursday in Rosemont, and we'll discuss that a little bit. But first, football. Um, Defense got riddled by Luke Altmaier and the Illinois quarterback on Saturday. Purdue got off to a good start, led 7-3, and then the fumble by Michael Jackson III. Ball was knocked out, recovered by Illinois, and from that point on, Illinois controlled and dominated the game. Jackson had another fumble on a punt later in the third quarter when Purdue had brought itself back into the game a little bit. But those two turnovers, eight penalties overall, but one was big, the offsides penalty on a 4th and 4 in the second quarter that led to a touchdown, kept a drive alive. Um, and Barry Odom was very matter of fact and really didn't want to deal with putting a positive spin on a game that he felt that Purdue was in, and they were, um, and had a chance to win. Now, we all know Purdue's margin of error is very small. And when you have penalties, you have turnovers, and you don't get any takeaways against a good team like Illinois, you're not going to win. But the defense got blitzed for 27 points in the second quarter, never recovered, and couldn't keep up offensively, even though the running game, Antonio Harris and Devin Mockabee did a nice job getting some yards, but too many inconsistent plays from the passing game. Ryan Brown was either off or his receivers were dropping passes. Um, so it wasn't a clean game for Purdue, and we've reached a point in the schedule where, and mentioned this before, that you don't have Ball State, you don't have Southern Illinois anymore. You got Big Ten teams, and you've got to play a clean game. You've got to play a smooth game. If you're Purdue, if you're Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan, you can get away with some mistakes uh, against some Big Ten competition, but Purdue can't afford to get away with those things. And going into Minnesota on Saturday, um, we'll see how much they tighten things up and clean those things up from a turnover standpoint and a penalty standpoint. And then the lack of communication in the secondary, two guys ran into each other on a long touchdown pass by Illinois. So those things, we're getting to the halfway point of the year, and those things need to get ironed out a little bit. But Barry Owen really didn't want. Uh, there was a question in the post game press conference about how hard they fought, they came back, and is that a positive type of thing? I'm paraphrasing here. Um, the full questions on my Substack site, and Barry Odom said, appreciate the question. Don't take this the wrong way, but I'm not interested in how hard we fought because aren't you supposed to do that every play? Aren't you supposed to do that all the time? So, um, he's trying to lay a foundation and convey a pretty strong message to his team and to the fan base and his coaches about what is expected. And I don't, to me, that's a positive that he's trying to get done here. Too many coaches in the past have just said, "Yeah, we played hard. We really got, we got back into the game. We played hard, but didn't have enough." And I think as Barry said Monday, it's like, well, we did all these things, but, and he said everything is followed with a but. But we didn't take care of the ball. We didn't. We had too many penalties. We had too many mistakes. We had too many communication breakdowns. So they've got to get rid of the buts if they're going to take a step forward from a win standpoint here in the month of October. And it's still there. They, their team is, they've lost some guys to injury, but they are competing. I'll say that they are competing, but in Odom's eyes, they're not competing consistently enough throughout the course of the game to make a difference. The schedule lightens up just a little bit because you're not facing a ranked team. You're not facing a college football playoff contender as you have the last 3 weeks with UCLA, Notre Dame, and Illinois. Now you got Minnesota, which is coming off a drubbing of Ohio State, but what Ohio State did to Minnesota is not what Purdue can do to Minnesota. So to me, that's kind of a irrelevant game to look at because Purdue can't do those same things to Ohio State. Ohio State's defense is outstanding. Purdue's defense is not outstanding. Minnesota's quarterback can um, can put together a strong game as he did a couple weeks ago against Rutgers. So to me, that's more of a blueprint and a template of what we might see Saturday and how much resistance can Purdue put up against a team like Minnesota uh, that has, they're they're equal kind of to Purdue from a program standpoint of what the ceiling is and what the bottom is. And um, Purdue's just got to find a way to um, again clean up those mistakes, and stop the run. Um, again, they ran the ball well against Illinois enough. Whether they needed to stick with it longer, but when you get behind, like they did, again, similar to USC, where USC got on top of them and had a touchdown to double-digit lead and maintained that throughout the game. Um, it's hard to come back just running the ball doing that. Notre Dame the same way. Notre Dame got on top of them early, and Purdue's forced to throw the ball a little bit more maybe than it wanted to. But in those two games, they couldn't get the running game going. And then against Illinois, they got their running game going, but again, you're playing from behind most of the game, and you gotta make up ground quick. I mean, the defense did limit Illinois to some field goals, and that's similar to USC. That was a positive step um, in what they were trying to get done. But still, the offense can't keep up right now at that pace. Illinois did punt, which was a positive because Purdue had not forced an opponent to punt since the Southern Illinois game. So they did make some stops and they put themselves in position. Um, but as we find out, they just don't have a lot of leeway in these games from a talent. They're just not as talented as some of these teams. Uh, but there are moments where they are competing well and they're playing well, but it has to last longer. It has to be consistent, and you know where their season eventually ends up going is going to be determined these next 3 games because in Purdue's mind they are winnable games. They're teams that they can compete with, that you don't feel overwhelmed playing them, but you've got to figure out a way to get a W in these games, whether it's Minnesota this week Northwestern would seem like a strong possibility next week. That game will be at 3 o'clock up at Northwestern in the tiny stadium that they have, and then you host Rutgers in homecoming at the end of the month. So these are three games that are gettable, but does Purdue have enough firepower, and can they play consistent enough in these games uh, to make a difference? And they need some guys to step up. They've got to get the communication problems in the secondary straightened out because Minnesota's looking at it on film, and they're going to attack and try to exploit what's going on back there or what's not going on back there. Purdue hasn't got a ton of pressure on the quarterback. They had a decent number of tackles for loss in the Illinois game, so they were producing some negative plays from a defensive standpoint, but too many guys running free um, in the secondary. And again, you faced I think, a really good quarterback. You faced another one this week with Drake Lindsey. I mean, he's a really good quarterback. He's when you take out the Ohio State game, you look at some of the other games that he's had this year. He's had a decent completion percentage, and that's the thing Purdue has struggled with these last three games, especially the last two games with opposing quarterbacks. I believe Notre Dame and Illinois, their quarterbacks are, I believe, 36 of 42 the last two games. So they've only had 6 incomplete passes in these last two games against Purdue's defense. So they've got to figure out a way to disrupt the quarterback. They've got to figure out a way to cover receivers better because there were just too many guys running free on Saturday against Illinois that they've got to straighten that up big time. So they need to not let the quarterbacks get so comfortable back there because they're gonna sit back there and try to pick apart that defense as much as they can. And then Minnesota's going to mix in the running game. They've always had a good running game, good offensive line, physical offensive line. Those type of teams have given Purdue problems over the years, similar to Northwestern coming up next week. They've always played physical against Purdue. They play physical against everybody, but Purdue has struggled in the last decade or so dealing with Northwestern's physicality up front. And that's probably going to be an issue again in a couple weeks. And then Rutgers, same thing. Physical team, Greg Schiano's, preaches physicality. And that's going to be so Purdue's going to have its run here of physicality against teams they should match up with before they get to November against teams they don't match up with, to be honest. Michigan, Ohio State, Washington, and Indiana teams right now, they don't match up well with. So they've got to make some noise here in October to get that done. If you're going to move off the 2 wins that you've gotten so far, at the beginning of the year, the Vegas odds maker, I think, put the win total at 3.5. There was some believe that Purdue could get 4 out of this year. Right now, to get to 4, you're going to have to win 2 of the next 3. And again, this program still, it's got to pick itself up from the Ryan Walters debacle, and I know what Indiana did in 1 year, but it's going to be hard for Purdue to have that kind of magic right now with its program. But again, I think Odom's on the right track. He's not sugarcoating anything. He's telling it like he sees it, and I think how most people see it right now, that they're beating themselves in a lot of ways, but the other team also plays a role. As one famous and successful high school coach told me many years ago, the other team does practice during the week, so you've got to take that into account, that they're preparing just as much as you are. to play this game. So another big game for football to see where they're at and where they might go. And another night game up in Minneapolis. Weather should be okay, not freezing cold um, as we've seen up there on numerous occasions. But um, again, I think you can um, watch Purdue football and see some things, see some progress, but also understand where they're at and the shortfalls that they have, and just be kind of real about the situation that they're in at this point. Uh, Big Ten Basketball Media Day for men and women. Women are Wednesday up in Rosemont. Men are Thursday, same place. Um, uh, Preseason All Big Ten men's team came out today. Braden Smith, the Player of the Year, no surprise there. Trey Kaufman-Renn on among the first team or players to watch, however the Big Ten phrases it nowadays. So no surprise there. Braden Smith and Trey Kaufman-Renn will be up in Rosemont along with Fletcher Loyer, although Smith and Kaufman-Renn will be the two main guys on the media circuit, as they've limited to Big Ten has limited to two players from each school, but Fletcher Loyer will be around for interviews. He just probably will not be on the BTN set when they do their segment, but he'll be around for interviews. Of course, Matt Painter will be around for interviews. All 18 coaches and other players will be around on Wednesday. Same for the women. Lana McCarthy and Madison Layden Zay will be up for the women along with Katie Geralds. And um, on my Substack site right now, um, preview the women's Big Ten Media Day with 18 teams, 18 questions, kind of one question for each team as they head to media day and they look ahead to the 2025-26 season. Um, Purdue's the women's question. There's several. I mean, there's just not this one. There's several, but I think the key one is: have they done enough? Um, have they brought in enough offensive firepower to average more than 60 points a game against Big Ten competition? Because that's what they did last year. That was dead last in the conference from an offensive standpoint. So have they brought enough production in to get out of that bottom part of the Big Ten and push themselves forward? I mean, the non-conference schedule, I think, as you know, or you should know, is not very strong. So Purdue needs to make some business here in the non-conference as far as getting wins. They have 11 non-conference games. The one game that they will not win will be at Kentucky in mid-November, but everything else is a game that they should win, they need to win, they must win. I mean, ideally, this team needs to go 10-1 in the non-conference. They'll play a Big Ten game in early December at Michigan. But after Christmas, when the Big Ten schedule really ramps up, Purdue needs to have 10 wins. They will probably, ideally, if you're charting this out, ideally they're 10-2 at that point because I'm factoring in a loss at Michigan for the women to open the Big Ten season before they resume activity after Christmas with two important home games for them, Illinois and Ohio State at home. Two games that right now uh, seem like Purdue could compete in those games and maybe pull an upset in one, but this is early October. That's late December. Let's see what we see from Purdue's team in the non-conference and what Illinois and Ohio State have. But those are going to be two key games for the program. They're a long way off, and they're already a bit shorthanded. They've lost Taylor Henderson probably for the year. She's a transfer from UNC Wilmington. She suffered an injury on the first day of practice. Purdue is reluctant right now to say that she's out for the year, but she's out for the year. I mean, she's not going to play this year. She will not be suiting up, but Purdue is not ready to say that. But they do have they have the Big Ten availability report that they have to participate in. So I'll be curious the designation for that for the first game in early November, how they do that. But their depth has taken a little bit of a hit, and the point guard that they brought in, Taylor Feldman from Northern Arizona, is dealing with a back issue throughout summer. Um, is she going to be ready to go by November 3rd against FDU? And Kendall Puryear had reconstructive ankle surgery. She seems to be okay. She seems to be on the right path. Um, but I think they're just kind of taking it easy with her. They're just trying to get their bodies to the first game and then go from there. Jeff Brom did that in football a lot. And all football coaches do it, kind of protect their players, just get everybody to the game healthy, and then play your first game, and then whatever happens after that happens. But don't do anything to aggravate an injury. Don't do anything to cause an injury. But the women are dealing with some injuries here, uh, and they're just trying to get to the first game, get everybody healthy, and then then go from there. So it's hard to tell exactly what they have right now. And I think, as I said the last time, I don't know how this injury to Taylor Henderson affects the team because we haven't seen her play with this group, and we can only go on what we saw, what we know about what she played at UNC Wilmington. I'm sure she had I'm sure they were planning on a role for her, whether that was a starting role. It's unclear, but they're not going to have her. But this is a big year for Katie in the program. Um, they need to. Um, this is this will sound strange for a long time women's basketball followers, but they just need to get in the Big Ten tournament. And to be honest, and we'll get into this more as the season approaches, but to me, the goals are pretty simple. Be 10-1 in the non-conference, get in the do enough in the Big Ten to get out of the basement, to get in the Big Ten tournament. And if you do that, maybe you qualify for a postseason tournament. It won't be the NCAA tournament, but the WNIT, the WBIT, the BIT is one that's sponsored by the NCAA now. You can get in a postseason tournament that probably would classify as a successful year, as this program needs to reset itself and start the upward climb that way. But more on that as we get closer to the year. The men's team is loaded. They're probably going to be, it'll be interesting who's ranked number one in the preseason in the polls. Right now, it kind of goes back and forth between Purdue and Houston. Um, uh, Purdue's team is pretty loaded, but Houston is too, and Purdue saw them in the Sweet 16 last year, so they know what they're all about. I think those are your two teams that are going to be out front to start the year, and both teams will play a difficult non-conference schedule, and it's not like Matt Painter's team doesn't have any questions. They do. They've got some questions how the rotations are going to work, where certain minutes are going to come from. You know what you get out of your big three, but how does everything else going to work? Where does Oscar Clough? Where does he? How does he fit into this group? And is he going to be the rebounding machine the numbers say that he's going to be? And the Israeli point guard, coming off the bench, how's that dynamic going to work? And you've still got Jakari Harris and C.J. Cox, who had really good freshman years. Now they're ready to take that next step. And where do they fit in? Where do those minutes come from? And so they've got some questions to iron out. The good news for them is they have the talent to iron it out. It's not like they're void of talent. And if one guy is not working out like you thought, you have another option. So they got plenty of options. They got plenty of depth there. Uh, their starters are going to be fabulous. When you get past the big three, who's going to start? and how that all dynamic works. And bottom line is that can they stay healthy, um, to get through the year. But it's a long it's a long season. It's going to start here in a month uh, when they play their opener in early November. They've got the scrimmage game at Kentucky at the end of this month. Then their preseason game or their exhibition game, and then they get into their season, and they've got a difficult non-conference schedule that they've got to battle through. Some tough road games at Alabama. They're going to get Auburn down in Indianapolis, and they've got a tournament in the Bahamas that they're going to play. So, um, they'll be challenged, but you know, they, by now they welcome those challenges uh, to the program. So, uh, volleyball had a good weekend at out in California. They swept USC and UCLA, where they won two games. They won two matches out there. They reverse swept UCLA and swept USC. So this was, I think a lot of people were curious how this year would go when they lost your two studs in the transfer portal, and how would they replenish the roster? And so far, so good. Big match Sunday, Nebraska. Nebraska is a beast and a different animal. They may not lose a match all year. I think they smoked Penn State last weekend, like really smoked them. And then volleyball's got Nebraska, and then they're playing um, the match down in Indianapolis against IU at Gainbridge Fieldhouse. And IU went out to California and beat USC and UCLA as well. So that will heighten that matchup. And as Indianapolis now, it seems, wants to get in the volleyball game. They're hosting this match, and they're hosting the Indiana High School State Finals coming up later this fall. So maybe Indianapolis is trying to get in the volleyball game here and get on. That sport is moving, trending in the right direction. And you see when Purdue plays some matches in Mackey Arena, you draw more than the 2,500 that you get in Holloway. Um, not as Didn't have as big a crowd as they did last year for the matches against Wisconsin in Indiana, where they were sellouts, but still more than you get in a normal match. They've got one more against Indiana at the end of the year over Thanksgiving weekend. So, that sport is growing. That sport is, moving in the right direction, and Purdue's right there on that wave. Purdue is going along with the popularity of the sport. That's why this match in Indianapolis is, intriguing in that way, to see what kind of crowd they're going to draw for that. And with Indianapolis down the road, whether it be next year or the year after that, maybe try to host a preseason event. If you remember, Purdue went to Nashville to start the year. I think they actually started the year in Knoxville and then went to Nashville to play Tennessee in a preseason event down there, where there were multiple matches, multiple highly ranked teams, and drew a really nice crowd. You wonder if Indianapolis will, jump into that area and maybe try to do some sort of preseason event, kind of a made for TV thing with Purdue, maybe Indiana, another Big Ten school, or bringing in an SEC school, ACC school, or Big 12 school to just keep the volleyball wave going, because Indianapolis seems interested in embracing volleyball and putting it on its stage. So we'll see where that goes over time. All right. Well, we appreciate you stopping by to the Has Been podcast, and thank you for checking this out. So we'll close up shop here on the back porch in the Has Been studio. And until next time, have a great day. And we'll be back next week to recap football's game at Minnesota and see what else is going on and what we learned from Big Ten Media Day. And I'm sure we'll learn a lot. We'll see how much we can convey to you, but we'll uh, we'll deal with that next week. Anyway, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it, and have a good day.